You know that feeling when you decide, just completely unequivocally, that it is time to change your life. You're sitting there, maybe you're listening to this deep dive on your commute right now, staring at the bumper in front of you or doing the dishes, and you just think, I need to get my act together.
Oh, yeah, that universal moment of frustration.
Exactly. And you want a diagnosis for whatever's holding you back. And usually when you talk about a diagnosis, there's this expectation of like absolute precision, like engineering, right?
Right.
If you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. That's the problem. We put a cast on it and it heals.
Because it's a binary system. It's either broken or it's not broken.
Hmm.
And the human brain desperately craves that kind of visual, categorical certainty. We want to see the fracture so we know exactly how to fix it.
It is incredibly comforting. But then you step into the world of personal transformation or habit building, and suddenly someone has just taken a sledgehammer to that x-ray machine.
Yeah, the clarity's just gone.
Completely gone. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is honestly just a murky, confusing mess. And that exact feeling of murkiness, it's the core reason you find yourself trapped in this endless, exhausting loop of doing things without ever actually completing anything.
You buy the planners, you download the habit trackers.
Right. You set the alarm for 5 in the morning, but you are operating entirely in the dark.
Because we spend our entire lives operating in the abstract, we rely on these conceptual shadows. We say things to ourselves like, I just need to be more disciplined, or I want to be a healthier person.
Which mean nothing, really.
Exactly. They aren't structural realities. They are just words floating in the ether. We don't have an X-ray machine to show us the actual mathematical structure of how a human being moves from point A to point B.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Because the mission today is to build you that exact X-ray machine. And I have to say, we have a stack of sources today that are, quite frankly, going to bend your mind a little bit.
They are incredibly dense, yeah.
Yeah, totally. We are decoding a highly intensive double-feature masterclass on META-MATICS Part 1. Specifically, we are targeting 2 major sections, Chapter E, which is all about the harvest, and Chapter F, which covers the event atom and representation decisions.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It really is. To do this, we are pulling from these deep dive operational manuals, some theoretical tests on becoming the architect of your own meaning, transcripts on linguistic algebraic convergence, and some incredibly detailed operational flowcharts.
And I won't deny that the stack of material reads like a textbook for a physics class that hasn't even been invented yet. It's intense. But the ultimate goal here is remarkably, urgently practical.
Yes.
We are going to explore the literal math of personal transformation. We are looking at how those abstract, murky goals you set on New Year's Eve can actually be systematically converted into precise, executable equations.
Though I do have to playfully warn you, you are about to do algebra for the soul. When I first cracked open these manuals and read the term META-MATICS, I felt this bizarre mix of wild enthusiasm and just total visceral mock intimidation.
Right, the M word scares people off.
Oh, completely. I haven't looked at an equation in anger since, like, high school calculus, and now I'm supposed to use one to fix my chronic procrastination.
It does sound deeply intimidating to slap the word mathematics onto human psychology, but the shift in perspective is crucial here. This isn't about crunching numbers.
Okay.
You aren't calculating the square root of your childhood trauma, It is about the geometry of meaning. It's the architecture of how we change. META-MATICS is this formalized language that allows us to map our subjective reality onto an objective framework so we can finally see the bones beneath the skin of our daily habits.
Love that phrase, the bones beneath the skin. Let's physically map that out. So the sources introduce this concept of META-MATICS, this mathematical language for mapping transformation, and they detail a system called the pseudo-algebraic concept mapping system.
Which is a mouthful.
It is a massive mouthful. But the core thesis here is wild. It suggests that our linguistic expressions, our passing thoughts, our daily intentions actually resolve into strict mathematical laws.
Think about Noam Chomsky's theory of universal grammar.
Okay.
In linguistics, Chomsky proposed that beneath the chaotic surface of every human language, whether it's English, Mandarin, Swahili, there are these deep structures. There are generative rules that build complex sentences out of simple foundational blocks like nouns and verbs.
So there's a hidden blueprint.
Exactly. A noun phrase, for example, isn't just a random assortment of sounds. It is built from a strict, systematic combination of determiners, nouns, and prepositional phrases. It operates like a formula.
So if I say the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, I haven't just thrown words into a blender. My brain subconsciously ran a structural equation to ensure that sentence makes sense to another human being.
Precisely. Your brain is running a linguistic algorithm. And META-MATICS suggests that personal transformation and human behavior operate on that exact same structural logic.
Wow.
Just as language uses grammatical rules to build sentences, your life uses variables and operators to build outcomes. In this system, the variables aren't numbers, they are human elements. Things like effort, time, resistance, clarity, focus. And the operators are the structural relationships between them: addition, multiplication, division.
Now, I want to pause here because the text makes a massive, crucial distinction about these variables that honestly completely changed how I look at my own energy. It says that variables like time or effort are capacitant, not agentic.
Yes. That is a huge paradigm shift.
If I am trying to use this system on a Tuesday morning when I'm exhausted, what does capacitant actually mean in real life?
It means the variables are entirely inert on their own. They don't have agency. Effort doesn't wake up and decide to apply itself to your novel.
Right.
Time doesn't inherently organize your garage for you. They are capacitant, meaning they are merely reservoirs of potential capacity. Think of them like batteries sitting on a workbench.
Okay, I like that visual.
A battery has the capacity to do work, but it is completely useless until a conscious agent picks it up, slots it into a device, and flips the switch.
And the agent is me.
The agent is you, the self, your focal agency. You are the operator that must interface with these capacitant variables to turn potential energy into kinetic energy.
So if I just sit around waiting to, quote, find the time or waiting for motivation to strike,
Then you are treating those variables as if they are agentic. You are expecting the battery to build the circuit itself, which is scientifically impossible.
that is a staggering reframe. So it's not enough to just have time and focus floating around in the background of my life. I have to actively plug them into a circuit. And the sources give us a very specific equation format to do exactly this.
The foundational formula.
Right. The formula is A over B plus C over D. Now, before anyone driving their car right now zones out thinking about high school fractions,
Yeah.
the slash, here the division symbol, does not mean division in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And I'm dividing A by B to get a decimal.
Far from it. In the pseudo-algebraic notation, the slash represents contextual shaping. It means filtered by or shaped by. The variable on top of the fraction, A, is the iterator. The iterator is the content. It is the active thing you are actually doing or applying. The variable on the bottom, B, is the delineator.
The delineator.
Right. The delineator is the context. It is the environment, the rule system, or the constraint dictating how or where you are doing the thing on top.
Let me push back on this a little because it still feels a little abstract to me. If I have a goal and I just say, I want to write a book, how on earth is that an equation? Why do I need to put writing over a delineator? It feels like we are overcomplicating a very simple desire.
Well, the desire is simple, sure, but the execution is highly complex, which is exactly why most people never finish the book they want to write.
Fair point.
If you just say, I want to write a book, that is one of those vague conceptual shadows we talked about. It gives your nervous system zero structural guidance. But if we put it into the META-MATICS formula, we start to see the X-ray.
Okay, walk me through it.
Writing becomes your iterator, variable A. That is a raw effort. But writing doesn't happen in a vacuum. It must be filtered through a delineator, variable B.
The environment.
Exactly. If your delineator is a noisy coffee shop with terrible Wi-Fi, the output of your writing iterator is going to be wildly different than if your delineator is a silent room at 5 a.m. before the kids wake up.
Oh man, I see it now. It's an audio mixing board.
Yes.
If I am a music producer, I can't just take the raw vocal track, the iterator, and crank the volume dial all the way up to 10 and expect a masterpiece. I have to filter that vocal track through the environment. I have to route it through the reverb dial, the EQ dial, the compression dial. Those effects are the delineators.
Yeah.
They shape the raw signal into something usable.
That is a flawless analogy. And extending that mixing board analogy brings us to the operator in the middle of the equation.
The plus sign.
Right, but it's a plus sign inside a circle. In META-MATICS, this means integration or synthesis. So you have your first filtered track, A over B, synthesizing with your second filtered track, C over D.
Let's plug real human behavior into that. Give me an example.
Okay, let's take an equation like curiosity over support, synthesized with time over engageability.
Okay, let's unpack that.
In plain English, this translates to: Your raw curiosity, as filtered by the support system around you, integrates with your available time, as filtered by how inherently engaging the material is.
Wow.
When you map a failing project like this, the diagnostic power is immediate. If you are failing to learn a new language, you don't just say, oh, I guess I'm lazy. You look at the X-ray.
You check the dials.
Exactly. Is your curiosity iterator strong, but your support delineator is choking it out because your friends mock you for trying? Or do you have plenty of time, but the engageability delineator is broken because the textbook is incredibly boring?
That's brilliant. You stop attacking your own character, and you start adjusting the dials on the mixing board. If the engageability dial is broken, you don't need more willpower. You just need a better textbook.
Right. You fix the delineator.
Okay, so to actually run these equations in real life, from start to finish, the source material provides an incredibly robust 11-step operational flow. It is a complete closed-loop cycle of transformation. But today, we are going to pull a Quentin Tarantino.
We are skipping the beginning,
We are jumping straight to the climax. We are starting at the end of the story.
which is structurally the best place to start. If you don't understand how the cycle harvests its results, the early steps just feel like busy work. Understanding the destination dictates the architecture of the entire journey.
Let's jump straight into Chapter E of the text, appropriately titled The Harvest. And the harvest begins at Step 8 of the 11-step flow. Step 8 is called Temporal Culmination, and the visual symbol assigned to this step in the flowcharts is an hourglass.
Temporal culmination is the exact decisive instant when a result is actually achieved. It is the molecular moment when transformation shifts from the active, exhausting process of becoming into the stabilized, integrated state of being.
The fan is finally passed from the top glass to the bottom glass. But the text is brutal here. It points out that Step 8 is where a massive percentage of highly motivated people completely fail. And they fail in two opposing directions. They either under-recognize completion or they wildly overextend. I read that section and I'm not gonna lie, I felt personally attacked.
It is the trap of the modern productivity mindset. Under-recognizing completion means you achieve a goal, you hit the milestone you've been sweating over for 6 months, and you immediately, almost pathologically, move to the next item on the to-do list without ever pausing.
Yes, you never celebrate.
You refuse to acknowledge that your state has changed. You never let your nervous system register the victory. It's a recipe for profound emptiness.
You're running on a treadmill, you hit 5 miles, and instead of getting off to drink water, you just bump the speed up to 6.
Precisely. And the opposite error is overextending. This is when you refuse to acknowledge the natural endpoint. You achieve the goal, the cycle is structurally complete, but you keep enforcing, you keep pushing the iterator.
Which just ruins it.
It inevitably leads to burnout, diminishing returns, and the eventual destruction of the very thing you just built.
So Step 8, the hourglass, is literally just about having the awareness to name the moment, to stick a flag in the ground and say, the cycle is done. And the sources outline 3 specific types of culmination to help us recognize when that hourglass turns.
Let's go through them.
First, there's event culmination. This is the obvious one. It's a discrete, time-stamped achievement. You hit publish on the blog post, you run across the finish line of the 10K, you sign the mortgage papers. It is an undeniable physical event in time and space.
Those are easy to spot, but the second type, threshold culmination, is much more subtle and insidious if you miss it.
How so?
This is a gradual internal shift that you usually only realize in retrospect. For example, let's say your 11-step cycle was about overcoming social anxiety. There isn't a finish line ribbon to break.
Right, there's no publish button for that.
Exactly. But one day, you were standing in front of a room of colleagues giving a presentation, and you suddenly realize, wait, I don't have that suffocating knot in my stomach. I am speaking clearly. You didn't cross a literal finish line, but an invisible internal threshold was passed.
The third type is fascinating. Saturation culmination. The text calls this the point of no return. This is when you have so thoroughly integrated the new pattern, the new equation, that the old way of operating is now physically or psychologically impossible to revert to.
Think about learning to ride a bicycle.
Okay.
Once your brain grasps the physics of balance, once that neural pathway reaches saturation culmination, you cannot unlearn it. If you try to intentionally fall off a bike, your body will reflexively try to correct your balance.
Oh, that's true.
The new state has saturated your operating system. The old pattern of falling is now entirely alien to you.
Now, hold on. When I read about threshold and saturation culmination, a major red flag went up for me.
What was that?
How do I know I've actually hit a real culmination? If I'm, say, 3 weeks into a new gym routine and I'm just exhausted and want to stay on the couch. What's stopping me from saying, yes, I have reached threshold culmination. I have evolved past the need for dumbbells. My journey here is done. How does the math prevent me from just rationalizing my own laziness?
It's the ultimate self-deception, and the architects of META-MATICS anticipate it perfectly. You can't just declare culmination by fiat. The text provides strict, observable markers to verify that the hourglass is actually turned.
What are the markers?
First, resistance drops significantly. The internal friction that characterized the early stages of the cycle, the dread, the heavy lifting required to start it, dissipates naturally. Not because you quit, but because the system is running efficiently.
So it's not that I'm avoiding the friction, it's that the friction is genuinely gone.
Exactly. Second, external reality confirms the internal shift. You don't just feel different, the environment reacts to you differently.
Give me an example of that.
Well, if you claim you've reached culmination in your communication skills, your partner will actually argue with you less. The world provides data.
Okay, that makes sense.
And third, the methods become invisible. You no longer have to consciously recite the rules or stare at the flowchart. You've integrated the mechanics into your natural, fluid behavior.
Okay, so I hit the marker, I see the hourglass turn, the friction is gone. But I can't just walk away and take a nap. Once you recognize that hourglass moment, you must immediately move to step 9. Step 9 is where we literally name what we just pulled out of the ground.
Step 9 is knowledge-directed creation. Its visual symbol in the framework is the synthesis operator, that circled plus sign we discussed earlier.
Right.
This step emphasizes a crucial law of the framework. It is never enough to merely finish. A finished cycle that isn't cataloged is lost. You must take an active inventory of your output.
I love how the text categorizes this inventory. It divides the output of your cycle into 2 distinct buckets. First, you have tangible artifacts.
The physical proof.
Right, these are the proofs that the cycle actually happened in the real world. If you just completed a brutal 7-day writing sprint, your tangible artifacts are the raw word count document, the tracked focus hours on your app, the empty coffee cups on your desk. It is the objective evidence of effort.
But the second bucket is arguably more important: intangible capacities.
What are those?
These are the internal upgrades, the new skills, the elevated baseline of your nervous system, the quiet realizations that alter your internal map. In that same 7-day writing sprint, the intangible capacity isn't the word count.
What is it then?
It is the profound, deeply earned realization that, oh, my psychological resistance always peaks at the 20-minute mark, and if I can just sit through minute 21, the flow state kicks in.
Reading this section immediately made me think of the loot drop in a massive video game.
Oh, perfect analogy.
Think about it. You just spent 3 hours navigating a dungeon, dodging traps, and you finally defeat the giant boss monster. The monster disintegrates. That is step 8, temporal culmination. The fight is over.
Right.
But when the boss dies, it drops a glowing treasure chest on the floor. If you just put your controller down and walk away from the screen without opening the chest, what's the point? Step 9 is walking your character over to the chest and picking up the loot. You have to put the new sword and the gold coins into your inventory.
That analogy holds up perfectly, especially as we transition into the next phase. Because what do you do immediately after picking up the loot?
You open your character menu.
You check your new stats. And that brings us to step 10, redualization.
The symbol for step 10 is the circled X symbol, right? This is the reflection phase.
Exactly. Step 10 asks you to look back at the mechanics of the tension, the duality that you just managed during the 11-step cycle.
Yeah.
You ask yourself, did the tension hold? When the pressure was highest, did my delineators break?
Did my environment fail me?
Right. What old habits dissolve? What new tensions are emerging now that I am operating at a higher altitude of capability?
Going back to the video game, step 10 is checking the armor stats. Did my shield hold up against that fire attack in phase 2 of the boss fight? No. Okay, I need to craft fire resistance before the next dungeon.
You are actively diagnosing the structural integrity of the cycle.
And this reflection, this redualization, serves as the launch pad to the absolute peak of the entire META-MATICS system, the bird's eye view. Step 11.
Step 11 is comprehensive comprehension. The symbol here is the circled star. This is the holistic integration of the entire cycle. If step 9 is picking up the sword and step 10 is checking its stats, step 11 is understanding the underlying code of the game itself.
Which is huge.
It is. This step asks you to extract a universal principle from your highly specific, messy human experience.
This part blew my mind because it forces you to stop making it all about you. It's not just about what happened to your feelings or your schedule. It's about understanding the physics of reality.
Yes, looking at the structural truth.
The text breaks comprehensive comprehension down into 3 ascending levels. Level 1 is the ground floor. It's simple factual reporting. I understand what happened. For example, I practice guitar for 30 minutes every day for a month.
Level 2 requires elevation. I understand why it happened. This is where you start to see the equations working in the background. It is about spotting patterns and relationships. Level 2 sounds like. I realized that when I placed my guitar in the center of the living room instead of the closet, my consistency skyrocketed.
You are recognizing the power of the delineator over the iterator.
Exactly. You see the environment shaping the effort.
And then you hit level 3, the absolute summit. I understand the universal architecture beneath the event. You strip away the guitar, you strip away the living room, and you extract a universal law. The source provides an incredible example of a level 3 realization.
Let's hear it.
It moves from that simple daily practice all the way up to transformation requires the integration of complementary opposites filtered through appropriate context.
That is the ultimate harvest. Think about the power of that realization. You aren't just learning a trivia fact about your daily habit. You are internalizing a fundamental truth about the nature of reality.
It scales to anything.
Completely. You can take that level 3 principle, the necessity of filtering complementary opposites through context, and apply it to fixing your marriage, or restructuring a corporate team, or writing a symphony.
And what the text hammers home is that step 11 is not a period at the end of a sentence. It's a portal. The manual constantly refers to this process as a spiral, not a circle.
Right, altitude versus repetition.
This is the difference between building altitude in your life versus just running on a flat track forever. If you don't do the hard work of step 11, if you don't extract the universal principle, you are doomed to repeat the exact same struggles in your next job, your next relationship, your next diet.
You will fight the same boss monster over and over because you never learned the code.
Exactly. Without step 11, you have motion, but no trajectory. You have to harvest the deep wisdom of the old cycle to serve as the combustible fuel for the new one. But the manual throws a massive curveball here.
It does.
Before we can begin a new cycle, before we forge the very first atom of a new transformation, we have to pause and check our balance. We have to look at the mathematical fraction of our agency and ask, who is actually sitting in the driver's seat of this equation?
This section is paramount. It introduces one of the most conceptually fascinating, paradigm-shifting parts of the entire source material, the position of one and the concept of the inversion kick.
This section genuinely forced me to put the manual down and go for a walk. Let's unpack the math of identity.
In META-MATICS, the number 1 is not treated as a value or a quantity to be counted. It is defined as the unity operator. It represents you. It is the focal agency of the system.
So wherever the 1 is placed in the mathematical expression, that is where your conscious attention, your willpower, and your authority reside.
Exactly. Let's go back to our fractions, our 1/over logic. The text outlines 2 fundamental opposing forms of agency. The first form is x over 1.
Okay, x over 1.
In this configuration, x is the iterator, the content, the task, the variable, and 1, which is yu, is on the bottom as the delineator, the shaping context. This means I am the delineator, I shape x.
So when you operate in x over 1 mode, you are the active agent wielding the tool. You are asserting dominance over the variable. You are dictating the terms of engagement.
The sources refer to this as the iterator first mode because your primary concern is actively driving the iterator forward through your sheer force of will.
The other form flips the fraction entirely. It is 1 over x. Here, you are the iterator on top and x is the delineator on the bottom. The math literally means x shapes me.
You are submitting to the variable. You are letting the environment or the process act as the filter for your experience. You are yielding.
This can sound incredibly abstract until you map it onto physical behavior. The text provides a brilliant mundane example to ground this, which is just the simple act of taking a walk home from the office.
Let's break that down.
If I decide to walk home in walking over 1 mode, I am the boss of that walk. I am in control. I am setting a brisk, aggressive pace because I decided I need cardiovascular exercise. I have meticulously chosen the exact route that avoids traffic lights to optimize my time.
You're optimizing.
Exactly. I have a deeply educational podcast playing in my ears at 1.5x speed to maximize my learning. I am shaping the variable of walking to serve my specific active utilitarian purposes. I am dominating the walk.
But imagine you pause, take a breath, and flip the position of 1. You enter 1 over walking.
Okay.
The physical mechanics of your legs moving might be identical, but the entire architectural experience changes. Now, you are yielding to the environment. You let the natural terrain dictate your pace.
Right.
If there's a hill, you slow down. You take your headphones out. You actually notice the temperature of the air, the sound of the traffic, the architecture of the buildings you pass. You let your thoughts wander wherever the rhythm of your footsteps takes them. You are allowing the experience of the walk to shape you.
Same exact activity. Same streets. Two completely different mathematical modes of human agency.
And understanding this duality brings us to the core mechanical necessity of the system, the inversion kick.
The inversion kick.
The text states this is an absolute, non-negotiable requirement for sustained transformation. You cannot simply pick one mode and live there forever. You must deliberately, consciously alternate between x over 1 and 1 over x. You must kick the fraction over.
The text is terrifyingly clear about what happens if you don't, because if you refuse to do the inversion kick, the system breaks. Let's say you are a CEO or a driven parent, and you are always in X over 1 mode.
Always control.
Always controlling, always driving the agenda, always optimizing your kids' schedules, always forcing the outcome. If you never yield, you will inevitably burn out. A human nervous system is simply not designed to maintain perpetual, unbroken dominance over its environment. The machinery will overheat and shatter.
And the inverse is equally destructive. If you are always in 1 over x mode, if you are always yielding, always letting the environment or the news cycle or other people's demands dictate your pace and direction, you become entirely passive.
You become a leaf blowing in the wind.
Exactly. You lose your agency entirely. The inversion kick is the conscious, tactical act of flipping the toggle switch. If you've been in X over 1 mode at work for a grueling 3-month sprint driving a massive project to completion, you cannot just transition into an X over 1 weekend where you aggressively optimize your garage.
You need a break.
You must deliberately introduce 1 over rest, or 1 over family time. You have to yield strategically to restore the baseline integrity of the system. It's a revelation, really. It takes this vague greeting card concept of work-life balance that we intuitively know we need, and it replaces it with an actual mathematical toggle switch. You can look at your week and say, my equation is entirely top-heavy. I need an inversion kick right now.
It gives you an operational tool instead of just guilt.
Exactly. So, with our agency calibrated, knowing how to balance our dominance and our yielding, we are finally ready to start a brand new cycle. We're ready to dive into Chapter F and forge the very first building block of transformation, the event atom.
This is step 1 of the operational flow. The event atom is represented in the flowcharts by 3 interconnected symbols.
Okay.
A gear, a white circle, and a black circle.
Okay.
It is defined as the irreducible, absolute starting point of any transformation. It is the molecular spark that ignites the equation. And the manual does not mince words here. It is incredibly stern. It says that if your event atom is weak, the entire 11-step cycle is doomed before you even take a step. It doesn't matter how flawless your time management is or how much willpower you have. If the foundational atom is unstable, the building collapses.
To bear the weight of an entire transformation, an event atom must possess 3 specific, non-negotiable properties.
What are they?
The trifold properties are clarity, presence, and embodiment. First, clarity. The atom cannot be vague or subject to interpretation. It must be brutally precise.
Makes sense. Second,
presence. It cannot be a projection into some hypothetical future. It must exist right now. And third, embodiment. It must be tied to a lived physical behavior, not merely an abstract concept floating in your mind.
let's do a stress test on this. Let's contrast a weak atom with a strong atom. A weak atom, the kind most people said on New Year's Day, sounds like this. I want to be richer. Let's run that through the 3 properties.
It violates all of them.
Completely. It's vague. What does richer mean? $10 or 10 million. It's a future projection I want to be, implying you aren't now. And it's not embodied. It's just a wish. There's no physical behavior attached to it.
It is an empty shell. A strong event atom, however, built on the principles of META-MATICS, sounds like this. I am a professional who prospects 5 new clients every morning.
Bam. Look at the structure of that. Present tense. I am. Clear behavior. Prospects 5 new clients. It is a specific identity inextricably fused with a specific observable action.
It meets all the criteria.
But I have a major problem with this, and I was arguing with the book while I read it. How does the math prevent me from just lying to myself?
What do you mean?
What if I construct a perfectly formatted event atom? I am a person who runs 5 miles daily, but deep down I hate running, I have bad knees, and I just saw a cool running video on Instagram and decided to fake it. How do I know if the atom is authentic?
It is the most common vulnerability in the system, and the sources address it by bridging the event atom directly back to the 40p.
The 4 pillars from part 2.
Yes, the 4 pillars of purpose. To verify that an atom isn't just aesthetic cosplay, you must interrogate it through 4 checkpoints: target, truth, totally, and title.
Let's break those down. Target is, where is this aiming?
Right. Does it align with your ultimate life architecture, or is it just a distraction?
Then, truth. Why are you doing this right now, really? Are you trying to impress someone, or does this solve a fundamental internal deficit?
Totally. I assume that's about commitment.
Exactly. Are you hedging your bets? Are you leaving yourself a back door to quit when it gets hard, or are you totally committed to the atom? And finally, title. What specific identity are you actively claiming when you execute this behavior?
If the atom disconnects from the 40p, it lacks combustible fuel. It's a beautiful car with no gas in the tank. If your atom is, I am someone who runs marathons, but your real truth is just that you desperately want external validation from your coworkers, that atom will split and detonate the second you face a rainy morning and a blister. Precisely. Authenticity is a structural requirement, not a moral one. But the text warns of another trap hidden in step 1. Even if your atom is incredibly true, deeply authentic, and passes the 40p test with flying colors, it might simply be the wrong size.
Yes. Chapter F spends a lot of time breaking down the 3 distinct scales of event atoms: macro, meso, and micro. And picking the wrong scale is fatal.
Let's start in the top. A macroatom operates at the highest possible conceptual identity level. For example, I am a visionary artist.
Sounds great on a t-shirt.
It does. It's profound, it's inspiring, but the structural risk is that it is far too big to actually act upon on a random Tuesday morning when you're tired. It lacks the surface area and the friction necessary to generate immediate granular behavior. What does a visionary artist do at 9:15 a.m.? It's too vast to answer.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the microatom. This operates purely at the behavioral floor. I write 500 words every morning. It is incredibly actionable. There's zero ambiguity.
But there's a risk there too.
Right. The risk is that it's too small, too mechanical, to actually shift your underlying identity unless you relentlessly stack thousands of them over years. If you only have a microatom, you eventually just feel like a biological robot executing a script. I typed 500 words. So what?
Which brings us to the architectural sweet spot for the vast majority of human transformation: the mesoatom.
The Goldilocks zone.
Exactly. The mesoatom operates at the domain level. It bridges the gap. An example would be, as a working creator, I ship finished projects. It bounds the grand identity creator to a specific, context-driven role and behavior shipping projects. It is meaningful enough to inspire, but bounded enough to dictate action today.
To ensure your atom is the perfect size and perfectly formed, the text demands that you put it through the 5 refinement passes. I think of this like putting your event atom through a high-pressure car wash to strip away any rust or weakness.
Let's walk through those passes.
Pass 1 is the tense check. The language must be locked in the present tense. If your atom contains the words I will or I am going to, it fails. You push it into the future where it demands no action today. Pass 2 is vagueness elimination. You have to strip out any subjective adjectives and replace them with observable, trackable actions.
Pass 3 is ownership verification. This is critical. You must ruthlessly remove any language or conditions that rely on external validation, luck, or someone else's permission.
Give me an example of failing Pass 3.
I am a best-selling author fails Pass 3 because the bestseller list relies on the public buying your book. You don't own that. I write pages that challenge me passes because you own the challenge entirely.
Pass 4 is the energy test. This is highly somatic. You literally say the atom out loud in an empty room. Does your physical body expand with a sense of alignment and excitement, or does your chest contract with a heavy leaden sense of obligation? Your nervous system will tell you if the math is wrong.
And finally, Pass 5, the fear edge check.
I love this one. Is the atom slightly, noticeably uncomfortable? If stating your atom doesn't scare you just a tiny bit, it is not a threshold for transformation. It is just a comforting, weighted blanket. It won't change you.
When you lay out the 40p checkpoints, the 3 scales, and the 5 refinement passes, it is entirely natural to feel overwhelmed. It feels like an immense, almost paralyzing amount of pressure just to set a simple goal.
I totally felt that. I was reading this and thinking, look, I just want to drink 64 ounces of water a day. Do I really need to perform a 5-pass psychological audit on my hydration?
It's a highly logical pushback, but the text clarifies a crucial distinction that solves that friction. Goals are endpoints. They are what the framework calls the root square of the overarching architecture, the final destination. But the event atom is not the goal.
Oh, right.
It is the immediate molecular starting point. It is the very next literal step you take.
That distinction changes everything.
It does. The meticulousness is required because common mistakes at this atomic level don't just delay the goal, they corrupt the entire operating system. The text warns specifically against 2 highly common structural failures. First is the fantasy atom.
What's the fantasy atom?
This is claiming the reward before the work. Like claiming I'm a master pianist before you've learned a scale. It floods your brain with unearned dopamine, destroying your drive. The second is the avoidance atom.
Which is framing your identity around a negative, right?
Exactly. Framing your entire identity around a negative void, like I will stop procrastinating. By building an atom around the word procrastinating, you are mathematically wiring your brain's reticular activating system to constantly scan for and focus on procrastination.
You're trying to build a house by only thinking about the termite damage. It doesn't work. Okay, so now we have it. We have survived the car wash. We have our perfectly scaled, fear-edge-tested, 4DP-fueled Meso atom. We know exactly what we're doing.
But the mathematical setup is still not quite done.
Right. We have the equation, but we have to decide which version of ourselves is actually going to execute it. And this is where we return to those 3 symbols that represent step 1. The white circle, the black circle, and the gear.
We're stepping into the deep waters of Chapter F here, exploring the metaphysical question of representation decisions. It's a question of deployment. How do you actually insert yourself into the mathematical equation of your daily life? You want a monolith. The framework offers 3 distinct modes of representation: person, persona, and principle.
The white circle represents the person. This is your core self. It is your direct, fully conscious, highly attuned agency. It is you, fully and authentically present in the moment. The manual states you must deploy the person mode when genuine emotional presence, complex problem-solving, and ethical alignment are absolutely non-negotiable.
But the metabolic cost of the person mode is extraordinarily steep. True presence burns massive amounts of cognitive and emotional energy. It requires undivided attention, and crucially, it cannot be delegated. You cannot put your authentic presence on an automated timer.
Then you have the black circle, which represents the persona. This is your strategic, role-based representation. You deploy this for context-specific performance. It's a mask, but a highly functional one.
Like what?
Like professional manager mode when you need to run a tight meeting despite having a headache. Or patient parent mode when you are dealing with a toddler's meltdown in a grocery store and your core person just wants to scream.
The utility of the persona is high, but the cost is cognitive friction. It requires conscious switching. You have to actively remember to put the mask on and take it off. And the manual warns that if you get stuck in a persona, if you wear the corporate executive mask home to your spouse, it leads to deep systemic dissonance.
And finally, we have the gear, which represents the principle. This is system-operated representation. This is where you remove human emotion and willpower from the equation entirely. You use principle mode for absolute consistency and infinite scalability.
It's the automation.
Exactly. It's your digital calendar automations, your preset alarm clock, the friction reduction protocol where you lay your gym clothes out on the floor the night before so you literally trip over them.
The beauty of the principle is that its cost is paid entirely upfront. It requires rigorous, thoughtful design before the event, but zero attention or willpower during execution. To see how these 3 modes interlock to create a functional human life, the text provides a specific hybrid META-MATICS formula.
Okay, let's hear the formula.
It is energy, which is person mode, over daily structure, which is principle mode, synthesized with commitment, which is person mode, over recovery capacity, which is principle mode.
Okay, let's map that equation out slowly with the symbols. That equation is a cheat code.
It is a masterpiece of strategic lifestyle design. Look at the iterators, the variables on the top of the fraction, energy and commitment. They are explicitly assigned the person mode, the white circle. This mathematically dictates that you must bring your authentic, daily, conscious presence to your energy and your commitment. You cannot automate giving a damn.
But look at the delineators. The variables on the bottom, the shape and context of daily structure and recovery capacity,
Hmm.
they are explicitly assigned the principal mode, the gear. They are heavily systemized.
Exactly, and that is the secret. You do not want to wake up every single morning and use your precious, highly limited person-level consciousness to decide when to start working, or how to organize your desk, or what time to go to sleep.
You'd burn out immediately.
If you do, you suffer decision fatigue by 10 a.m. You build a principle, a hard-coded schedule, an automated sleep tracking system, an unbending rule to handle the context automatically. This mathematical structure preserves your limited person-level energy strictly for the iterators that actually demand it.
I absolutely love this.
Mm.
I think of it like deciding how to run a massive corporation. If every single trivial decision, like ordering printer paper or approving a $10 expense, requires the CEO, which is the person mode, the company instantly bottlenecks and the CEO has a heart attack.
Right.
Sometimes you need to deploy the shift manager, the persona, to handle a specific, tense client interaction. And sometimes you just need a really bulletproof software script, the principal, to automate the payroll so nobody even has to think about it.
If you try to run your life entirely in person mode, feeling every emotion and making every decision from scratch every day, you exhaust yourself into paralysis. If you run your life entirely in principle mode, existing only on alarms and strict routines, you become a biological robot, devoid of joy and meaning. The math demands a dynamic, perfectly calibrated balance of representation.
This brings us to a really heavy but absolutely crucial part of the deep dive. We've talked about how to build a beautiful, structurally sound equation. But what happens when the architect have compromised? What happens when we refuse to refine our starting atoms, when our internal operating system is built on rigid illusions, and we insist on running our entire existence in a completely unilateral, dominant X/1 mode?
The manual addresses this dark reality in a profound section titled The Alchemy of Perception, exploring the catastrophic danger of faulty architecture. It explains how the mind's internal data points our past traumas, our inherited cultural conditioning, our unexamined biases operate mathematically as hypotheses, not as absolute truths.
But because we live inside our own heads, we treat those hypotheses as concrete reality. If we leave those biases unexamined, they harden. They become calcified cognitive shortcuts that literally hijack our perception of the delineators around us. You start fighting phantoms.
You build massive equations to solve problems that don't actually exist because your internal map is drawn incorrectly.
And to illustrate the ultimate horrifying endpoint of a system that refuses to update its data, the source material provides a massive historical case study.
Yes. The text offers a deep structural analysis of Adolf Hitler's military strategy during World War II, framing it as the ultimate historical manifestation of the fatal flaw of supremacy.
And we should clarify, the text strips away the political narrative to examine the regime purely as a mathematical operating system that collapsed under the weight of its own faulty architecture. It's a purely structural lesson. It highlights three massive systemic distortions that guarantee destruction.
According to the structural analysis in the text, the first systemic distortion was the myth of divine infallibility. Translated into META-MATICS, the core iterator of the entire regime was built on a delusion of absolute destiny.
Right.
It was an impossibly rigid iterator that refused any and all negative feedback. If a battle was lost, it wasn't a flaw in the strategy, it was blamed on cowardly generals. Every warning from intelligence officers was ignored because the core atom of the system could not mathematically compute the concept of being wrong.
The second distortion was the fiction of enemy inferiority. In the language of our equations, this is a catastrophic systemic failure to accurately assess the delineators, the external variables and context shaping the war. By institutionally assuming that adversaries were ideologically weak or racially subhuman, the German command system operated on fatally flawed data.
They vastly underestimated the industrial capacity of the Soviet Union, the resilience of the British public, and the rapid mobilization capabilities of the opposing forces. If your equation says A over B, but you are completely hallucinating the actual value of B, the system will explode.
And the third distortion, which ties everything we've talked about together, was the illusion of unilateral control. The text points out that the supremacy ideology strictly forbade any mechanism of what it calls empathetic research.
That phrase, empathetic research, is a critical concept in systems theory. It does not mean sympathy or moral agreement. Empathetic research means possessing the intellectual humility to accurately observe, measure, and understand the environment, the variables, and the feedback loops around you.
Which they completely lacked.
Because the regime was entirely built on a delusion of absolute X over 1, control the insane idea that sheer fanatical willpower could dominate all physical variables, it lost the ability to adapt. It considered yielding to the environment a moral weakness. It could not execute the inversion kick. It could not shift to 1 over X when the terrain demanded it.
So when the harsh, immovable realities of the external context clashed with that rigid internal illusion, the system shattered. When Operation Barbarossa ran into the brutal, freezing reality of the Russian winter, a massive environmental delineator the system couldn't adapt. When they declared war on the United States, bringing an unstoppable industrial machine into the equation, the internal data didn't update to reflect the new reality.
The errors compounded massively until the architecture collapsed on itself.
Extrapolating from this grim structural lesson, the META-MATICS framework is making a profound, universal point about the physics of reality. Any system, whether it is an individual human life, a corporate entity, or a global empire that refuses to update its delineators, that violently rejects negative feedback from its context, and that operates on the rigid illusion of complete unbroken control, will inevitably collapse under its own weight. It is mathematically guaranteed.
True strategy, true mathematical harmony in the equations of our lives requires deep humility. It requires the courage to adapt. It requires you to actively observe the environment through empathetic research and have the bravery to update your internal code when the world tells you that you are wrong.
We have to actively, aggressively debug our own mental operating systems. We have to question our biases and our conditioned responses, or we risk spending our entire lives frantically fighting phantoms of our own making, burning energy on equations that will never yield a harvest.
We must be willing to let reality shape us just as fiercely as we seek to shape reality. That is the essence of the inversion kick.
So after all of this algebra for the soul, all of these flowcharts and historical analyses, what does this actually mean for you? Listening right now, the core message of this entire masterclass is an empowering one. You are the architect of your own meaning.
Meaning isn't some hidden treasure buried in the woods waiting for you to stumble upon it. It isn't assigned to you by the universe.
Meaning is a building. It is constructed brick by careful brick, using the event atoms, the capacitance variables, and the operators of your daily conscious choices.
We have traveled a massive conceptual distance today. We started at the very end of an old cycle, learning how to recognize the hourglass turning, how to pick up the loot, and how to harvest universal wisdom at step 11, comprehensive comprehension.
And then we use that extracted wisdom to loop all the way back to the incredibly precise molecular birth of a new cycle at step 1, learning how to forge an event atom that is authentic, perfectly scaled, and dynamically represented by your person, persona, and principles.
But I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought from the source material. Everything we've discussed today implies a scale of time. We talked about building these massive cycles, these 11-step flows that can take weeks, months, or even years to complete.
But in the final pages, the text introduces a concept called the fractal bridge and saturation.
It is the ultimate realization that the macro structure is built entirely out of the micro moments.
Exactly. I want you to consider this. What if the ultimate atomic unit of your entire life's transformation isn't a year-long resolution? What if it isn't a 90-day sprint or a week or even a single well-planned day?
What if the true fundamental unit of change in the human experience is a single, fully saturated quarter second of dual participation?
A quarter second where you manage to hold the entire architecture in your mind. A moment where you are fully, physically present in the action, operating in pure person mode, while simultaneously observing yourself, taking the action from the altitude of the meta-mind.
Imagine sitting at your desk, feeling the urge to quit a hard task and check your phone. In that quarter second, you feel the resistance. But instead of yielding automatically, you run the equation. You see the delineator. You recognize the tension. You stay present.
If you can string enough of those fully awake, saturated quarter seconds together, you don't just change your morning routine. You rewrite the fundamental mathematics of your entire existence. You stop being the broken X-ray machine full of murky, confusing shadows, and you become the masterful engineer of your own clarity.
So your mission for today. Don't stress about memorizing the 11 steps just yet. Don't worry about mapping out a 5-year plan.
Just go out into your life, find the friction, and locate one single saturated quarter second.
The architecture is waiting for you to plug in.
Happy building.